What's going on, guys? Welcome back to part 2 of our Haas run in F1 Manager 22. We are coming off of a very solid first outing of the season around the Bahrain circuit. Kevin Magnussen comes home with some huge points for us in round 1, and unfortunately Mick just couldn't get anything going, but we hope to have him bounce back very nicely here around Jeddah here in our second round of this season, as we are going to catch up on our email. Still getting used to a lot of what a lot of this new stuff is. As I mentioned a lot in episode 1, there's a lot of new things to get used to and a lot of things to try and find and get worked out on our way to success. So here we are finding out what it takes to design some new components. Don't really know what's going on here, but we know that we need to make some changes now and quickly, as our car definitely needs some improvements as we continue to make our push to reach the top of the F1 grid. So nonetheless, we're going to poke around here, try and figure it out along the way. This focus section here, I think I don't really truly understand even at this point, but I think it's going to become a big and huge play in the future. But for now, I think we're just going to leave it alone, and we will get this project started. $900,000 into this investment into our future vehicle later this season. But nonetheless, we are here and we are finally taking a look at our car tab as we take a look at the cars that we have between Mick Schumacher and Kevin Magnussen, at all the different components that we have available to us. You can see that we have a new suspension made, and we are going to go ahead and throw that on right now. As we see, it does a lot for our medium and high speed cornering, as well as our dirty air cornering, and even a little bit of an upgrade in our top speed in general. So that's the new suspension. We will take everything that we can get. I think this was the research that was started as we started the game, so we're definitely not complaining about having one on the move already. So at this point, we are going to manufacture some replacements and some backup parts just in case, and we are well on our way to improving ourselves. And yeah, we're really excited about the future here. And there's definitely a lot of tabs that you can play with, and there's a lot that is going on. But nonetheless, we have to just kind of poke around and figure it out. So what's the easiest way to figure it out? Kind of just, click around, see what's sick, see what you find, and see what works and what doesn't. As we're taking a look at the driver market here, trying to look and potentially scout out a new driver. I've heard a lot about Theo Porcher in real life, and so at this point we're kind of looking at him as potentially replacing our reserve driver. We want to potentially have a good reserve driver that could potentially get some seat time and potentially work his way up into a future position should they really start to prove themselves as the reserve driver. And just in case we need to make some changes, we have him available to us. He won't be the perfect replacement, but I think his growth potential is high. I think he's only 18 years old, so there's definitely a lot of growth potential in this young man. And so we're going to hopefully get him scouted up. Hopefully he'll work out for us, and we'll try and figure out what scouting drivers looks like. As we've obviously now moved over to our facilities, we take a look and see what's around. We can see that our team hub construction is complete. That's going to be huge for our team morale as we continue to move forward. And now the race weekend is upon us, and we are taking a look at what our performance targets are going to be. And we are going to hope that we can reach Q2 here. And I think we'll leave everything else alone, just because when it comes to in-race performance, I think we're still very, very much a novice, and we will hopefully not put ourselves out too much, even if those potential rewards are quite high. But I think we can reach Q2. I think it's something that we can definitely handle as a team, so we're going to give it a go. But for now, let's head to the race weekend.
Formula One is back. Welcome to one of the fastest circuits on the calendar here at Jeddah. The Saudi Arabian Grand Prix is about to kick off, and the atmosphere here is electric. The Jeddah Street Circuit has one of the fastest average speeds, as well as the most corners of any track on the calendar. Good high-speed downforce is going to make life in the fast lane a little easier for drivers here this weekend. At this early stage in the season, there are still plenty of opportunities for things to change. In this sport, there simply are no guarantees. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Formula One.
We find ourselves with our first practice session of the season here in P2. We decided to go ahead and skip free practice 1 just because it felt like it would probably be smarter to let the AI kind of set up the car initially for us, and we could hop in at FP2 and try and figure out what they did, what we need to do, what to focus on, and exactly what's going on as we are going forward here quite quickly as we're trying to wait for the setup confidence to come in. I think I discovered at this point that free practice is not necessarily about watching a lot of the racing. It's just kind of focusing a lot on the data and trying to make sure that we set our cars up the best of our abilities and try and give our drivers something decent to work with on race days. We can see Mick Schumacher's confidence is at 62%. And as they head back to the garage, we will take a look and see if we can make it any better. These sliders are going to be the bane of my existence, as it will not be the first time that these kinds of puzzles or little mini games are definitely going to be the death of me, as I'm definitely not the most experienced and the most knowledgeable at these kinds of things. But we'll get some new tires thrown on these cars. We'll get them back out there and hopefully increase the confidence in the car, in these drivers. And so yeah, we're just gonna continue on here. I've learned at this point, kind of taking a peek behind the curtain, that you really can get a few good sessions in a given practice session, and so it doesn't matter too much, at least from what I've understood, at exactly what it takes to get that new set of confidence going. I think something you definitely can do is definitely underrun your driver here, as I think we saw that Kevin Magnussen actually, we said both drivers actually, as like I said, only 10 laps. I think I didn't realize that you really need to let them get out there and run for a lot longer than 10 laps to get that feedback. And so at this point, we'll figure that out, that lesson out very quickly here. And unfortunately, we'll waste a little bit of time, but nonetheless, we are going to get some valuable track acclimatization time, as that's also extremely important for our drivers to learn this circuit. But you can see there that I found out that the setup confidence really needs a lot longer to run, and so unfortunately, we got a couple of feedback points, but nonetheless, we are looking at potentially missing out on some valuable feedback time. But this is the first practice that we run, and so we really aren't going to hold ourselves too stringent to what we should and shouldn't be doing. And here you can see me just absolutely messing around and playing with these sliders to no avail, and getting a little flustered with it as we continue to try and find the balance for the setup confidence. And this is definitely something that I think you'll get better at along the way, but considering this was the first time that I'd seen this minigame specifically, we definitely don't need to analyze it too much. But nonetheless, the pre-practice session 2 is complete, and we'll just jump straight into this point after simming Q3, or FP3 rather. We'll head straight into qualifying for the Jeddah Circuit Grand Prix here. I believe it's Saudi Arabia. I forgot off the top of my head. But we will head into Q1 here, trying to make sure to time our releases nicely as not to cause too much traffic. But nonetheless, we are going to hop out behind the Mercedes of George Russell and the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc. We'll speed up time here a little bit, and we will get our first qualifying lap here around Jeddah. And we're hoping for the best. I think this is something that really suits, I think this kind of track suits the Haas car in real life a lot, but I definitely found over the course of that free practice 2 session, as well as early on in this qualifying session, that in the game it definitely doesn't suit us quite as well as we had hoped. Whether that's a setup issue or something else, I'm not entirely sure. We'll hopefully figure that out in later seasons, but right now we're just hoping for the best as we're on board here with Mick Schumacher in his first qualifying lap, coming down the back straight towards the final turn, and we will get underway here in qualifying as the first few laps come home. Charles Leclerc currently sitting on P1 with a 1:29, and Kevin Magnussen and Mick Schumacher come home much off the pace, as we find ourselves almost a full second and a half and 1.8 seconds back in Mick Schumacher's case off of the leader here. and we will watch ourselves slowly tumble down the order a little bit as the rest of the field comes home to finish their first qualifying laps. And so at this point we are, working on everything that we can, so we'll get to we'll get the cars refueled up and ready to go out again, and we will go ahead and send them out immediately, trying out a couple of different tactics here to see what works best. We try to figure out if multiple runs early and then maybe one late, or in this instance we're just kind of seeing exactly what happens here and trying to improve as quickly as we can after a relatively unfortunate first set of runs. We find ourselves with about 4 minutes left, with Kevin Magnussen a little safer than Mick Schumacher, but nonetheless definitely a lot of work to do. Kevin Magnussen sitting in P9 and Mick Schumacher in P12 as we sit near the 4-minute mark, and so we have a lot of things we need to try and figure out. We will throw on a new set of softs for Mick Schumacher, trying to give him the best chance we can, as well as Kevin Magnussen. I think I'm definitely feeling the pressure here when it comes to qualifying, because we're definitely going to use up a lot of sets of soft tires in qualifying, at least in the early part of the season, as we try and gain some confidence and try and figure out the best strategies when it comes to running and qualifying as well as running in the race. So we will prepare, run down the time a little bit here, trying to make sure that we still will cross the line as we see the cars begin to make their way out onto the circuit for their final flying laps here in Q1. And we'll slow it right down as to make sure that we don't miss our opportunity to make it across the line here. So we will go ahead and send out Mick Schumacher first, wait a moment, and send out Kevin Magnussen right at the tail end. We will be the final 2 cars to cross the line, or at least that's the goal. As we start our flying laps, we will hop on board once again with our drivers, watching them make their way around the circuit and hoping and praying that they can improve as much as we need them to at this point. I think Mick Schumacher is definitely in a bit of the danger zone as we'll come across the line to start our flying lap. I think we're looking at people like Fernando Alonso, who's currently in P13, improving by a lot and a great margin. Daniel Ricciardo also very capable. Lewis Hamilton, you can see down there in P18, will absolutely improve, and Pierre Gasly probably also is someone that should improve quite a bit more than where we currently stand, as we will take manual control just to see what it's like here around Jeddah, but we will stay on board. We'll debate whether or not overtake and deploy is better. I think we actually make a mistake here, as deploy seems to be the right call in terms of qualifying, and so I think you can see me here quickly try and work through that in my head. And unfortunately, I think we lose a little bit of time of deployment by running the overtake there. So a little bit of a mistake on my part. Probably at this point should be relying on the automatic running more than not at this point, as the first couple of cars come home to finish their qualifying session. Sergio Perez unable to improve. Pierre Gasly, you can see, jumps all the way up into P7, pushing Mick Schumacher down slightly even more. Thankfully, the Williams of Alex Albon and Nicholas Latifi unable to improve, and we are hoping for the best here, as the McLarens are going to come home and finish as well. Daniel Ricciardo goes faster than Mick, and so he is now on the stone bubble and is actually pushed down all the way to P16, and now Mick has to make some major improvements as he comes closer and closer down the final straight. 2 green sectors. Will it be enough to get himself out of Q1? It will, as he pushes himself up into P15 and barely squeaking by all the way up into Q2, and Kevin Magnussen holds firm in P12. And while it might have been a butt clincher of a moment, we are both through into Q2, and we are feeling pretty good, continuing to try and carry that momentum from Bahrain here into Jeddah. And we will head now into the first runs of Q2. We will go ahead and take a look. We'll send them out on a set of used soft tires to get their first runs in. The soft tires we used on that last qualifying run of Q1, and just to get a nice baseline time in, not having to worry about wasting that last set of fresh softs just yet. And so we will hopefully get a pretty comparable time. Hopefully we won't need to use and do too many runs, but nonetheless, we are going to head out here nice and early, try and beat the traffic a little bit, hopefully not getting held up too much on the cars who decide to make their move after we come home to round the final corner on to the beginning of our flying laps. So we will stay on board here with Mick Schumacher. I think it's definitely probably better to keep an eye on him more than Kevin Magnussen at this point, as Kevin will definitely be the veteran of our team, and so we were hoping to follow along here with Mick, trying to make the most of his lap. Even if we are going to leave it on automatic mode, I think it's definitely better to keep an eye on him, as if things if push comes to shove, I think he definitely is the one to watch more than Kevin Magnussen, as Kevin has had more than a few years experience, and while he may not be the fastest driver on the grid, I do like his aggression, and I do enjoy the kind of pace that he's able to have brought in real life and as well so far in the game, coming home to finish in P7 around Bahrain, as both of our drivers come home to finish, still finding a bit of pace under ourselves, as we find ourselves about 1.5 and 1.6 seconds off the leader of Sergio Perez so far here early in Q2. So hopefully a fresh set of softs will be able to help us out, as we did we have to keep in mind that was a used set of soft tires, and so we will throw on our last set of soft fresh tires. And I think here is another moment where we had to sit and think and wait and just try and decide if going out early again is better, or if it's at this point best to wait and send them out towards the end with the rest of the pack. I think we learned a lot from Bahrain as well as Q1, that potentially just waiting until the last moment, where hopefully we'll get the cleanest air and potentially even a bit of a tow towards the back of the grid, at least in terms of getting back out to finish our final flying laps. This is also going to be a bit of a stopping point for us, as we definitely will run the risk here of potentially not making it to the line if we do make a mistake, and we're definitely trying not to do that if at all possible, as we definitely don't need to make any more mistakes than absolutely necessary. And so as the final cars of Q2 make their way out of the pit lane, we will send Kevin and Mick out onto the circuit behind the Alfa Romeos of Valtteri Bottas and Zhou Guanyu, and we will wait and see our fate here, as we find ourselves currently sitting in P10 and P11 here in Jeddah. We're a little late on the pause button. We're still getting used to the UI here, but we will now hop on board with Kevin Magnussen as he starts his final flying lap of Q2, as the clock strikes 0 for the session, and it is do or die time for us, as both Mick and Kevin find themselves very much in danger, as everyone below them, Fernando Alonso, Pierre Gasly, Lando Norris, and George Russell, all extremely capable of going faster, and probably based on car performance and car build at this point, probably should go faster than us. But nonetheless, we have to try and get lucky, put in a good lap. Unfortunately, Mick puts in a yellow first sector, and that is definitely going to make things a lot harder for him, especially. Kevin puts in a green middle sector there. Unfortunately, the first sector didn't really pop up. I don't think we got to the screen in time. So Mick goes green in his second sector, and we're hoping at this point that Kevin can maybe be the one to push us out and into Q3, as we will round the final corner here with on board with Kevin Magnussen, who currently sits in P15. Only our 2 cars left. Kevin has to go much faster. So cross the line and only make it up into P12 here, as Mick comes home to cross the line and does improve, but does not make up any places. And unfortunately, we are knocked out of qualifying in Q2, finishing in P12 for Kevin Magnussen and P15 for Mick Schumacher. A little disappointing after the results that we had in Bahrain, but I think it might have more to do with my strategy more than anything, as I think we definitely could have given them a better car at this point, and definitely
Teams
a better
of drivers
setup,
ready and raring to go.
Haas gave a solid performance in qualifying, and they'll be happy enough with their grid position here. Let's see if they can make it work for them. Alfa Romeo managed to meet expectations during qualifying, and if they can keep this up, they'll have a good race ahead of them. And the night sky here is very overcast, with no moon or stars in sight. This might spell trouble for the teams and their drivers.
Well, the streets of Jeddah are abuzz, and the teams are nearly ready for the start of the Saudi Arabian.
So here we are on a cloudy day around the Jeddah circuit. We are going to set our strategies for our 2 drivers. We're kind of eyeing up the 1 stops. It definitely looks like the plan is definitely a 1 stop, either going from the medium to hard or the other way around. Trying to decide what's probably best for Mick, I think, is definitely trying to give him a little bit of pace in the beginning of the race, trying to let him make up some ground, and kind of doing the opposite with Kevin. I think we're trying to hope that the experience of Kevin will allow him to start on the hard tire and allow him to not necessarily fall off the pace too much while trying to make up ground later, especially if on the faster medium tire for everyone who decided to start the other way around. And so we'll see if this strategy works, but let's go ahead and head to the
There's
grid.
a very overcast night in store for the drivers who are now lined up on the grid. Let's take a look at Haas. There's the other Haas. They're in the back half of the pack, so they'll need to work hard if they want a podium finish. The race start is mere seconds away. Moments away from this.
As we
The
head to the
Saudi
green
Arabian
flag
Grand
and the
Prix.
5 red lights
It's
here
lights
in
out,
Saudi
and
Arabia.
away we
The
go.
lights are out and we are away here in Jeddah. Starting off, we are trying to, I guess when I say we're trying to do anything, I think we're just kind of watching at this point. But we're going to go ahead and set to overtake to see if there's anything that we can do to start off the race fast, try and make up some easy positions off the start while all of the cars are here bunched up around the first few corners. I don't think there's necessarily a lot of merit, at least from my opinion right now, that setting the tires beyond anything besides just the normal standard, as you know, everyone is pretty bunched up, and I don't think there's really much use at this point to doing that. And even if you look at our ERS deployment, even though it's set to overtake, there doesn't really seem to be that much opportunity to overtake. And so I think in the future we'll probably avoid overtake at the beginning of the race. At least we probably should. I think it'll probably sound better on paper than it will actually come out, as it looks like we almost hold firm. Kevin Magnussen actually looking like he yeah, I don't know, actually I think we're exactly where we started the race. Kevin in P12 and Mick in P15, but nonetheless we find ourselves on the board with Kevin Magnussen as he is chasing around the AlphaTauri of Yuki Tsunoda. And unfortunately, Kevin actually falls down a couple of places thanks to a poorly timed move as we jump forward here to lap 5. And we find ourselves running quite a bit at the back, but we do see that we have some pretty good tire wear, at least as of where we are now. And we will discover that the 4 times speed as well, just because at this point running in the back doesn't seem the most fun, and those intervals that we're seeing definitely are not the best. As you can see that we actually forgot to take Mick Schumacher off of overtake deployment, so we run his battery pretty much completely dry. And so at this point we are hoping to wait to see if things can get a little more spicy, as Kevin has, you know, over a almost 3 second gap briefly to Yuki Tsunoda ahead, and Mick just a couple of spots behind with a McLaren of Daniel Ricciardo in the middle. But as you can see, it looks like, you know, Kevin has, you know, a 2.5 second gap ahead to the AlphaTauri, and Daniel Ricciardo has a 3.5 second gap to Kevin, and Mick has a 2 second gap to Daniel. It definitely find ourselves kind of getting dragged along in the rear of the group, kind of really unable to make up the ground that we need to. Kevin on the hard tires definitely dropping a lot of pace compared to the AlphaTauri on these softs, and so this is definitely a bit of a nightmare scenario, as Jeddah definitely seems one of those circuits that you really need to rely on DRS and kind of holding on to the pack to kind of get pulled forward and along. And so if you get left behind, I think it's really easy to get left behind for sure, as we find ourselves, you know, already 11 laps into this race, and not a whole lot has really happened, just because the circuit is so stretch and top speed dependent that it's really hard to make up the ground when you need to. I think it also should be noted, at least by myself, that we definitely are not pushing hard enough on these tires at this point. I think we definitely see that our tire wear is, you know, at or above where it should be. And so finally on lap 12, I finally decided to push Mick on those medium tires, something I should have been doing from the beginning, trying to get him up into the up some positions. Definitely starting on the medium tire, getting stuck behind those on the hard tire by not pushing further sooner definitely is a mistake that I made, and I think I kind of cost Mick a lot of time in this race. So we'll try and make up for it as best we can. As you can see there, Kevin kind of having an entire bubble to himself, kind of as he has all race long so far. But after a little bit of time, we see after pushing Mick onto the aggressive strategy with tires, we actually see that he is caught up slightly to the back of the McLaren of Daniel Ricciardo. So we are hopping on board with the most action we've seen in 15 laps of this race, as we watch Mick try and make his way around the papaya colored car ahead. But as you can see here, he'll make the move up the inside, and it looks like he'll actually get the job done. And thankfully as well, with the DRS detection zone, he'll actually have DRS down that main straight and open up quite a large gap to Daniel behind as he falls back almost 2 full seconds. And we can see that we can actually push Mick quite a lot, as he has almost 6 excess laps of fuel, as well as a lot of excess tire wear as we open up his pit window in this race. So definitely something we'll learn in the future, at least when it comes to starting on these softer tires. Definitely more necessary to start faster than not, as we see here, as Mick now is trying to make his way up towards Kevin, who's currently running here in P12. Trying not to use too much ERS if we don't have to, especially with the amount of gap that we have. We're definitely going to need it towards the end of the race if we do somehow find ourselves once again in the pack and in the mix for some more action. But we will just continue to hold on board here. Now lap 18 of 50 laps here around Jeddah, trying to make our way around. I think we're pretty okay to push on fuel. And something that I didn't think about in the moment, but probably will think about as we continue to move forward in this series, is the idea of potentially pushing fuel a lot faster in the beginning, trying to burn off some of that fuel and try and get lighter and a little bit quicker around the circuit, and then potentially worry about fuel saving in the later half of the race. It's something to play with, and I think we could potentially see some success on that, as I definitely don't think I like the idea of starting on lower fuel. I think I'd rather just be able to push harder in the beginning of the race. So we'll leave Mick on his final push. We'll put him on deploy ERS and potentially move him up to overtake ERS, as we are following the Mercedes of Lewis Hamilton, who had just come out of the pits on his stop. And so we are hoping to get a good run here onto his pit lap, as we find ourselves 20 laps into this 50 lap race. Not a whole lot has really happened. We see that we moved up a few positions thanks to some pit stops of those ahead. Kevin now currently running in P9 and Mick running in P11. Obviously, Kevin on the hard tire is going to be going much longer than Mick in this one, and potentially trying to make up that time later on in the stint, as we move Kevin up into the aggressive tire, and Mick comes in and finishes his stop now onto a fresh set of hards. We will leave him on the regular tire aggressiveness, just to continue to warm up those tires and really get them rubbered in to this one, as we will now take a peek ahead at the front of the pack here, as Carlos Sainz has almost a 10-second gap between him and second place, his teammate Charles Leclerc, and it looks like Carlos Sainz is absolutely running away with this race off the rip. And you can actually see that the front pack actually is quite a bit spread out themselves, as like I mentioned, the aforementioned 9.8 second gap to second place, as well as the almost 3.5 second gap that Max Verstappen has to Charles Leclerc in second. Then there's a 3-second gap from George Russell to Max Verstappen, and then Valtteri Bottas has about a 2-second gap, and then Sergio Perez about 1.5 seconds, and then Fernando Alonso about 5 seconds. And so you can see that there is a lot of free space in between all of these cars here. As much as we had hoped that these new regulations would help keep the cars relatively close, it does not seem to be working that way, as the intervals, I don't know if there's a single, let's see, it looks like Lance Stroll, Zhou Guanyu, and Nicholas Latifi are probably the closest set of cars on the grid as of right now, with Latifi and Stroll chasing around the Alfa Romeo Zhou Guanyu. But other than that, it looks like there's almost a minimum 1.5 second gap between everyone and the car in front and behind them. And so there is a lot of free space, and a lot of fast lap times definitely have the potential to be set today. But at this point, we are just absolutely just cruising on at this point. I don't know if there's a whole lot we can do. We move Kevin up to a more aggressive state, trying to potentially put in and whittle down that time, as we do see that gap to Esteban Ocon come down to about 1.1, 1.2, trying to work into DRS, especially as we had worked in saving some of Kevin's tires here for this specific stint, as it reaches 50% wear left. And we are working on lap 24, so we definitely are trying to do our best to make the push, and we do get within DRS of Esteban Ocon, and so we are on the hunt at this point. And I think something that I find very interesting and really enjoy about this game versus something like F1 22 is that you really feel the necessity to really think about attacking in more of a multi-lap strategy rather than a maybe just a multi-sector strategy. And so I knew that catching up to Esteban Ocon was the first step in this attack, and it was really going to not necessarily be an immediate overtake, and we are going to try and pick and choose our moments wisely, and we'll at this point also get the benefit of DRS and trying to get pulled along closer and further into the top 10, as we also know that we definitely need to still be making a stop, obviously, as we enter our pit window. And so we're reaching the opportunity to try and push quite hard, especially with the bit of fuel saving that we've done so far in the race. I wish I had more ERS to use during this pit window stretch, just as battling Esteban Ocon would have been nice to be able to get by him and potentially try and put a little bit of space between me and him, or at least me and the rest of the pack. I guess I say me, I mean Kevin and the rest of the pack as we move towards his pit window, because running in the top 10 is nice, but being able to pull away a little bit and try and secure your spot in the top 10 is even nicer. And so we'll get multiple instances of notifications of overtakes one way or the other by the game here. It's actually quite funny when you're watching a battle like this, especially with DRS and how powerful it is. You definitely can see that notification a lot of a driver overtaking your driver and then your driver re-overtaking that driver. And it becomes quite comical at that point, just to know that that battle's still going on no matter what. As it will go in and confirm Kevin's pit stop on this lap. We'll put him on full push. This is the moment where I definitely wish I'd had more ERS to be able to put him on deploy and kind of let him, really just go to town on this end lap. But we find ourselves getting past Esteban Ocon, who looks like he still also needs to stop on his hard tires. And so we recognize that getting by him was definitely something that was going to help us in the long run, as we will come in and enter Kevin's pit stop window here. Ocon continues on, and we know that we definitely have a potential spot there, as he still will need to stop on those hard tires. I think he was somewhere around 43% wear left on those, and so we definitely need to get on it, especially now on these softer compound medium tires. And there's a lot of opportunity here to get another set of points, even though if it may not be a lot of points, there's definitely an opportunity for points, as we are now chasing the back of the AlphaTauri of Pierre Gasly, trying to make sure we don't fall too far away from Esteban Ocon and up there in P9. That's definitely, he is the one that we have the best chance of overtaking on this one stop. But if we get held up too much or aren't able to close the gap enough, we definitely run the risk of falling and staying outside of the points here, as we find ourselves running in P11. And then looking at Mick, he definitely finds himself still in his own little world there in the back in P14, doing pretty well on tires. I think he's very well set up to go to the end on these set of tires, doing pretty well in terms of wear compared to those around him. Thankfully, his starting stint, we were so nice on those medium tires that I think we kind of just left him alone. He's definitely on pace, and we'll move him up actually into a bit more of an aggressive strategy, trying to see if we can close that distance a bit. That 11-second gap and growing is definitely not something you want to see. But nonetheless, we find Kevin here sitting in P10, doing what he does best, being very solid and hoping to pull home, even if it is just a point, but it's a point that we wouldn't have otherwise. We do find ourselves with Esteban Ocon on our tail, trying to do his best to re-overtake us and secure that, at that point, single point for Alpine, who would join his teammate Fernando Alonso there in P9. And so we are doing our best as we see Ocon come through with 8 laps remaining in this race. We're definitely not super worried about that overtake, as long as we can hold on to the back of him. I think we'll be very much okay. But we also have to realize that his advantage against us is definitely going to be his fresher set of medium tires. He went a few laps longer on his hard tires, and so he definitely will have the advantage down the stretch of this race, having fresher medium tires than us. And so it's something we have to keep in mind, and we also know that we can't let him get too far away from us, as if he pulls away from us in DRS, I think that's going to definitely be it. And so 6-7 laps remaining if you include that last lap, and we have we still have a long way to go in this race. We are definitely keeping an eye on our ERS deployment, trying to make sure to get by when we can, but also making sure that we're harvesting as much as we can as well. And so it is going to be a bit of a chess match. That's 40 laps of a race, and it'll really come down to the last 5 or 6 laps, depending on whether or not we will get points here in Jeddah. and so we are going to defend when we need to. We're going to leave it in neutral if we need to as well, and trying to make sure that we're harvesting at the end of this first straight, especially trying to make sure that our ERS store is going to be as big as possible, as much as it can be. So nonetheless, we find ourselves trying to pull away from S1 Ocon, but he just is relentless behind us, always within that 1 to 3/10 of a second back, trying to just stay in our slipstream and trying to overtake us in those moments where he can. So that was a really unlucky moment where he gets DRS, still overtakes us on the inside, and is able to pull away and open up quite a large gap thanks to that DRS deployment. And so at this point, it's really do or die for us here with only a few laps remaining. We need to get back within that DRS range. And if he pulls away just a little too much, I think that'll do it for us here. And we'll be looking out from the outside and at points. And so we are definitely trying to micromanage Kevin Magnussen at this point. I think we've kind of given up a bit on Mick Schumacher, who I think will probably more than likely come home to finish in P13 here with about a 20-second gap on either side of himself. To really finish that. So I think he just really lacked the pace on those old hard tires to really close the gap, and so I think he'll come home to finish just outside the points as well. But nonetheless, Kevin Magnussen here is the real fight as we are down to our last few laps, keeping an eye on our tires, our ERS, our fuel, trying to make sure that one, we can bring it home, but two, not letting Esteban Ocon get away too much. And unfortunately, just a series of bad luck as we now find ourselves with a 2-second gap behind, and not a whole lot that we can really do about it at this point. We're coming home to start lap 49, even though I found that the lap counter at the end of races is a little odd, as now it'll jump ahead as Charles Leclerc starts his final lap. And we now see, looking at that 2-second gap, it definitely seems like it is almost a done deal at this point, that we are going to finish just outside the points. Extremely unfortunately, a very unlikely and unlucky series of events for us. We'll find ourselves outside the points here around Jeddah, but nonetheless, it is going to be a very long season ahead. But nonetheless, we will continue to fight here. We actually get a bit of a glimmer of hope as Kevin Magnussen, as Pierre Gasly actually slows up the group just enough. We'll actually move the time down to make sure that we're doing this all okay, trying to see if there's any way that we can squeeze past, but unfortunately a back marker really just ruins that for us, as Charles Leclerc will come home to win the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. A back marker really slows us down off the tail of Pierre Gasly, and so Esteban Ocon, who had been running in 10th before us for so long, catches up to Pierre Gasly. We actually catch up to the both of them, have ourselves an opportunity to make something happen, but a back marker in this game is almost a death sentence, especially on the last lap. So we will round the final corner, see the points ahead of us, but unfortunately it will be none for us, as we will come home to finish in P11 and P13 in this one. A very solid result for sure, but being ever so close to the points will never feel as good as you want it to be. And so unfortunately we will leave Saudi Arabia with no points, as we watch Mick come home to cross the line, the last to cross the line. A very solid race from Mick. I think we kind of let him down pretty early on. We tried to make up for it, but at the end of the race it definitely just seemed like we lacked the pace that everyone else seemed to.
A brilliant performance from the Haas driver. Haas there having a very successful day at the races.
They do say success breeds success, and I'm sure the team will be hoping that holds true.
And they're in 6th place in the constructor standings at the end of this weekend.
And for the next round, Formula One is heading down under. Exciting times ahead in Australia on the shores of the Albert Park Lake.
So a bit of a disappointing one for us here, as Kevin Magnussen finishes in P11 and Mick Schumacher in P13, but nonetheless a solid result for our team. Nonetheless, definitely overperforming probably our car performance at this point, but I'm having so much fun with this game, and I can't wait to continue to work on bringing Haas a World Drivers Champion as well as the Constructors Champion. So we'll get our driver development points up and going. But nonetheless, next up is Australia in part 3, and I will see you guys in the next one.